What happens when the most ruthless man in the city tries to destroy a small restaurant just to build another glass tower? He walks in like he owns the world, dismisses the staff, and points to a simple waitress cleaning tables. He tells her, "You're in over your head, sweetheart. Go get me your owner, or just leave." But he just made the biggest mistake of his life. He didn't just insult a waitress. He just declared war on the one person in the city who could, and would, destroy his entire empire. Not knowing that the waitress he tried to fire was the owner. The Gilded Spoon was not the most expensive restaurant in New York City, but it was, according to many, the most perfect. It was old-world elegance without the stuffiness, a place of warm mahogany, soft amber lighting, and white tablecloths so crisp they seemed to sigh when a glass was set upon them. And on this Tuesday evening, it was Elena Vance's sanctuary. To the clientele, she was just Elena, a senior waitress with a calm demeanor and an uncanny ability to know you wanted a refill on your San Pellegrino before you did. She wore the standard uniform, a black bistro apron over a pressed white shirt, her honey blonde hair pulled into a severe, practical bun. She was polishing silverware at a side station when the front door opened, letting in a gust of cold October air, and a man who seemed to take up all the oxygen in the room. His name was Marcus Thorne. Elena knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. Thorne Dynamics was a hydra of real estate development, devouring beloved city blocks and replacing them with sterile, mirror-glass skyscrapers that bled the sky. He was a corporate raider in a $10,000 Tom Ford suit, and he moved with an entourage of 3 others, 2 men and a woman, all in matching severe black suits, clutching tablets like shields. "A table! The best one!" Marcus snapped at the host, not looking up from his phone. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. Do you have a reservation?" The young host, Peter, asked nervously. "Do I look like a man who needs a reservation?" Thorne replied, finally looking up. His eyes were a pale, Arctic blue. "The name is Thorne. Find it." Peter, flustered, found a cancellation at the best window booth. As Eleanor watched them be seated, her stomach tightened. Men like Marcus Thorne didn't come to places like the Gilded Spoon for the ambiance. They came to consume. For 20 minutes, the table was a vortex of disruption. Thorne spoke loudly into his phone about leveraging assets and hostile dissolution. He sent back his first glass of wine, a 2017 Barolo, claiming it was corked. Leo, the veteran bartender, muttered to Eleanor, "It's not corked. He just wants to prove he can." Eleanor nodded, her eyes fixed on the table. She was the acting floor manager tonight, which meant he was, unfortunately, her problem. The final straw came when Thorne's main course arrived. He had ordered the duck confit. He stared at it for a long moment, then pushed the plate away with such force that it nearly slid off the table. "Inedible," he boomed, silencing the dining room. Elena was at his side in an instant. "Sir, is there a problem with your dish?" Marcus Thorne looked up at her, his gaze travelling from her simple black shoes up to her apron and landing on her face with a look of profound disinterest. It was the look one gives an automated kiosk that has malfunctioned. "There are several problems, sir," he said, mocking her professionalism. "First, I've been waiting 15 minutes for a simple dish. Second, it's overcooked. And third, I have a multi-million-dollar proposition for the owner of this establishment. And I'm being forced to deal with children." He gestured at Peter, the host. "I apologize for the wait, Mr. Thorne. I am the manager on duty. I can have the chef refire the duck for you immediately." He held up a hand, a gesture of such dismissive arrogance it made her blood flash hot. "Stop, just stop talking." His associates watched, smirking. "I didn't ask for the manager. I asked for the owner," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing condescension. "I'm here to talk about a deal that will finally put this tired little restaurant out of its misery. I need to speak to the person whose name is on the deed. Someone who can actually sign a contract, not someone who just clears tables. Elena kept her face a mask of professional calm, though it took every ounce of her training. The owner is not available at the moment. However, I am empowered to handle any propositions, if you'd like to leave your information. This was the wrong thing to say. Thorne laughed, a short, barking sound. Empowered? You? Sweetheart, you're empowered to refill my water glass. You are clearly, painfully, in over your head. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card. He didn't hand it to her. He tossed it onto the table. Here's what you're going to do, he said, as if speaking to a child. You're going to go to whatever back office this place has. You're going to find the actual owner. And you're going to tell them that Marcus Thorne is waiting. And if you can't handle that, if that simple task is too complex for you. He leaned in, his voice dropping so only she could hear it. In fact, just leave. Get out of my sight. You're ruining my appetite. Send me someone who matters. The entire dining room was silent. The staff was frozen. Elena Vance stood there for a beat, the sting of the public humiliation radiating from her. She looked at the man. She looked at his card. Then she looked at his plate. She picked up the business card, her fingers not trembling in the slightest. I apologize, Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice perfectly even, betraying no emotion. You're right. This is clearly a matter for the owner. She turned, her back straight, and picked up his discarded plate of duck. The person in charge, she said, will be with you shortly. She walked toward the kitchen, leaving Marcus Thorne smirking in his booth, already turning back to his phone, victorious. He had dismissed the help. He was ready to buy the building. He had no idea that the waitress he had just ordered to leave was Elena Vance, and she didn't just own the restaurant. She owned the entire block. Elena pushed through the swinging double doors into the bright, chaotic warmth of the kitchen. The head chef, Maria, a formidable woman with a map of Sicily in her features, looked up from the pass. What's wrong? Maria asked. I heard the lion roar. Mr. Thorne finds the duck. Inedible, Elena said, setting the plate down. He also ordered me to leave. The kitchen staff paused. He what? Elena held up a hand. It's fine. Leo, she called to the bartender, who was stocking at glasses. Keep an eye on table 7. Don't let them want for anything. But don't engage. Just observe. She walked past the pantry, past the bustling workstations, and to a small, unmarked door at the very back. She punched in a 6-digit code. The door opened not to a closet, but to a narrow staircase. She climbed the stairs, the sounds of the restaurant fading beneath her. The second floor was silent, dark, and smelled of old paper. She entered her real office, a space that couldn't be more different from the dining room below. It was a minimalist tech hub, 3 glowing monitors, a sleek server rack humming quietly, and a wall of windows overlooking the city skyline, a view, ironically, blocked by one of Thorne's own monolithic towers. Elena Vance sat in her leather chair and let out the breath she'd been holding. She pulled the elastic from her hair, letting it fall to her shoulders. She was not Elena the waitress. Not here. Here, she was the sole proprietor of AV Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm. The Gilded Spoon wasn't just a restaurant. It was the cornerstone of AV1, the internal designation for the 5 historic properties she owned on this block alone. This wasn't a passion project. It was a fortress. The Gilded Spoon had belonged to her father, Arthur Vance. He was a man with a taste for champagne and a talent for terrible investments. He had run the beloved restaurant into the ground, drowning it in debt, taking out predatory loans against the property. When he died, Elena, who had just sold her groundbreaking data analytics firm, Athena AI, to Google for an amount that made Forbes dizzy, had a choice. She could let the banks take the building, the last piece of her family's legacy, or she could save it. She'd quietly bought out the debt through her holding company, AV Holdings, the name a quiet tribute to her father. The press knew Elena Vance as a tech recluse, a under 30 wunderkind who had vanished after her buyout. They had no idea she was a restaurateur. For the last 6 months, she had been working the floor. Not as a game, not as some undercover boss stunt. She was there to learn. She was there to understand, from the ground up, why her father had failed. She was there to find the rot in the financials, the disloyal managers, whom she'd since fired, and to earn the trust of the staff her father had mistreated. The staff, Leo, Maria, Peter, they thought she was just a manager who had been promoted quickly by the new mysterious owners. They didn't know she was the one signing their paychecks. She powered on her main monitor. Marcus Thorne. She had been expecting this. Not him, specifically, but someone like him. For 3 months, AV Holdings had been receiving letters from Thorne Dynamics. They started as polite inquiries, then became aggressive, multi-million-dollar offers for the entire block. She knew he wanted to raise it all. The restaurant, the Old World bakery next door, the family-run law firm above it. She had ignored every letter. Now he was here. He thought he could bully the small-time owner of a tired little restaurant into selling. He had just spent 10 minutes insulting, demeaning, and dismissing the very person he had been trying to find for months. He told her to just leave. He called her sweetheart. He thought she was in over her head. A cold, sharp smile touched Elena's lips. This was not a problem. This was an opportunity. He had shown her his entire hand, and he hadn't even realized he was sitting at the card table. She opened a secure file on her computer, labeled Thorne D. It was already populated. Elena hadn't built Athena AI by being unprepared. She had dossiers on every major developer in the city. She knew about his leveraged buyouts, his history of union busting, and the whispers of a shaky foundation in his much-lauded Brazil project. He wanted to talk to the owner. Fine. She picked up her private phone and dialed her actual general manager, David Chen, who ran the holding company's day-to-day operations from an office 3 blocks away. "David," she said, her voice all business, "I need you to come to the Gilded Spoon. Right now. Use the back stairs." "What's wrong?" "Marcus Thorne is at table 7. He's difficult." "Thorne? Is he making a scene?" "He is," Elena said, looking at her reflection in the dark monitor. "He just demanded to see the owner. He's about to meet her representative." She hung up and walked to a tall, narrow closet in the corner of her office. She pushed aside a rack of spare waitress uniforms. Hanging in the back was a sharp, midnight blue Alexander McQueen pantsuit, a pair of black Louboutin heels, and a silk shell. Marcus Thorne wanted to talk to someone who matters. She was going to give him exactly what he wanted. 20 minutes later, the dynamic in the dining room had changed. The air crackled. Marcus Thorne was impatient, tapping his pen against his water glass. His associates were checking their watches. He had expected the owner to come crawling out, eager for his lowball offer. The dining room doors opened. This time it was not a waitress. It was a woman who commanded the room. Her honey-blonde hair was no longer in a bun, but fell in a sleek, professional curtain past her shoulders. The ill-fitting uniform was gone, replaced by a pantsuit, tailored so perfectly it looked molded to her. Her heels clicked with sharp authority on the hardwood floor. She was flanked by David Chen, who carried a leather portfolio. They stopped at table 7. Marcus Thorne looked up, annoyed, ready to snap at another underling. His mouth stopped open. He stared. He looked at the woman, then at the empty side station where the waitress had been, then back at the woman. Recognition, profound confusion, and a flicker of something else, interest, flashed across his face. He knew this face. He'd seen it on the cover of Forbes last year. "Elena Vance?" he said, his voice losing its confident boom for the first time. From Athena AI." "Mr. Thorne," Elena said. Her voice was different. The warm, accommodating tone of the waitress was gone. In its place was a voice of cold, polished steel. "I understand you had a business proposition." One of his lawyers, a man named Harrison, leaned in and whispered, "That's her. The one who sold to Google. What is she doing here?" Marcus recovered, though a dull red flush was creeping up his neck. He was piecing it together, and he didn't like the picture. "Ms. Vance, this is a surprise. I was under the impression you were in coding or some such." "I manage a diverse portfolio, Mr. Thorne. AV Holdings, the owner of this building, is one of my assets," Elena said smoothly. She did not sit. She stood, forcing them to look up at her. David stood beside her, silent as a sentinel. "So you're the owner," Thorne said, his eyes narrowing. He was reevaluating. This was no longer a simple buyout. "I represent the owner," Elena said, sticking to her script. It was a small, crucial distinction. "My firm handles their entire portfolio. You wanted to speak to the person who makes decisions. You are." Thorne leaned back, attempting to regain his swagger. He was a shark, and he'd just met another shark. "Good. Then let's stop wasting time. My company, Thorne Dynamics, is prepared to make a very generous offer to acquire this property. And the 4 adjacent ones. We're redeveloping the entire block." He gestured to Harrison, who slid a thick, leather-bound proposal across the table. "We are offering $32 million for the block." David Chen didn't flinch, but Eleanor saw his fingers tighten on his portfolio. The offer was an insult. The land alone was worth twice that, not to mention the air rights. Eleanor didn't look at the proposal. She kept her eyes locked on Marcus. $32 million, she repeated, her voice flat. "It's a generous offer, Ms. Vance," Thorne said, a predatory smile returning. "This place, it's charming, but it's bleeding money. Our research shows its Q2 revenue was down 18%. The whole block is a drain. We're offering you a clean, profitable exit. The owner should be grateful." Elena finally allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Your research is flawed, Mr. Thorne," she said. She nodded to David, who opened his own portfolio and produced a single, slim sheet of paper. He handed it to her. "Your research seems to have missed the Q3 report," Elena continued, "which was filed after my firm restructured the business. Revenue is not down 18%. As of this week, it is up 22% quarter over quarter. Our reservation log is booked solid for 8 weeks. The adjacent properties are leased at 98% capacity, all triple net leases." She slid the paper across the table to him. It was a simple profit and loss summary. "Your research is also old," she said. "You're referencing the numbers from when Arthur Vance ran this restaurant. He was, as you correctly assessed, bleeding money. But Arthur Vance is dead. AV Holdings is now the sole proprietor. And we are not." Marcus Thorne stared at the P&L sheet. His face, which had been flushed, was now pale. He had come in with a bazooka to hunt a rabbit, and had just found himself facing a tank. "Furthermore," Elena said, her voice dropping, "your $32 million offer doesn't cover our gross revenue for the last 18 months, let alone the generous valuation of the real estate you're claiming to offer." She placed her hands on the table and leaned in, mirroring his earlier, intimidating posture. "So, Mr. Thorne, here is our response. We are not interested in your offer. We are not interested in a counter-offer. We are not selling, not this building, not this block, not now, not ever." Thorne's mask of civility cracked. "Who the hell do you think you are? You're a tech girl playing restaurant. You have no idea what you're sitting on." "I know exactly what I'm sitting on," Elena said. I'm sitting on the most profitable, non-leveraged block of real estate in this district, and you want it, not to redevelop, but to secure the air rights for your monstrosity over on 54th Street, which, according to my research, is currently $400 million over budget and tied up in litigation with the city. The silence from Thorne's side of the table was absolute. Harrison, the lawyer, looked ill. Elena had just confirmed she not only knew her own business, she knew his. This is outrageous, Thorne stammered, his arrogance curdling into rage. You're making a mistake, a huge one. It's not a mistake, Mr. Thorne. It's a business decision. Elena straightened up. David will validate your check. Your meal, of course, is on the house. I believe you found the duck. Inedible? She looked at him, and for a second he saw the waitress again. The calm, dismissive eyes. Who are you to this owner? He snarled. His daughter? His girlfriend? Elena smiled. I'm the person who says no. She turned and, without a backward glance, walked away, leaving Marcus Thorne sputtering in a room full of stunned patrons. He was a man who had never been told no in his life. He looked at the P&L sheet, then at Elena's retreating back. This wasn't over. This was war. Marcus Thorne was not a man who accepted defeat. He was a man who crushed obstacles. If he couldn't buy the obstacle, he would destroy it. He left the Gilded Spoon that night, his face a mask of thunder. He didn't return to his office. He went to a private club, the Vanguard, and made 2 calls. The first was to Genevieve Harding, the most feared and influential food critic at the New York Chronicle. Her reviews could make or break a restaurant overnight. She also owed Marcus a favor after he'd generously invested in her son's doomed tech startup. The second call was to a fixer, a man who specialized in navigating the city's labyrinthine web of regulations and departments. The Gilded Spoon's victory felt good for exactly 36 hours. On Thursday morning, the Chronicle hit the stands. The review was on the front page of the lifestyle section. The headline was brutal. The Gilded Spoon's tarnish. Elena read it in her office, a cold knot of dread in her stomach. Genevieve Harding's review was a masterpiece of character assassination. She didn't just critique the food, she attacked the very soul of the restaurant. While the room strains for an elegance it never achieves, Harding wrote, the service is where the fantasy truly collapses. The staff, led by a flustered and clearly in over her head manager in a stained apron, seemed panicked by the presence of a discerning clientele. The Barolo was serviceable, but the duck confit. One imagines it had been cooked, forgotten, and then rediscovered under a heat lamp. It was, in a word, inedible. The exact words. In over her head. Inedible. It was a direct quote from Marcus Thorne. He hadn't just fed her the lines, he'd forced her to print them. Eleanor felt sick. Stained apron. She'd been wearing that apron when she served him. This wasn't a review. It was a hit piece. The phone began to ring. And ring. And ring. Peter, the host, looked shell-shocked. Ms. Vance, they're all cancellations. We've lost 60 tables for this weekend. They're all quoting the Chronicle review. By Friday, the restaurant was a ghost town. The lively buzz was gone, replaced by a heavy, anxious silence. The staff, who had been so loyal, were now terrified. Elena, Leo, the bartender said, polishing the same glass for the 5th time. This is bad. This is Arthur Vance level bad. The new owners, they need to do something. They need to issue a statement. People are saying we're done. The owners are aware, Leo, Elena said, forcing a calm she didn't feel. They are. Working on it. Are they? He pressed, his voice full of worry. Or are they just going to cut bait? My wife, Sarah, she's got her 2nd round of chemo. I can't. I need this job. You are not losing your job, Leo. she said, with a ferocity that surprised him. "I promise you." But the attack wasn't over. On Monday morning, just as Chef Maria was receiving her produce delivery, 2 men in grey suits arrived. "Department of Health and Sanitation," one of them announced, flashing a badge. "We're here for a surprise inspection. We received an anonymous tip regarding a severe rodent infestation." Maria's eyes widened in outrage. "Rodents? This kitchen is spotless. I'm here at 5 a.m. every morning. There are no rodents." The inspectors were unmoved. They tore the kitchen apart. They shoved thermometers into cooling units. They swabbed surfaces. They spent 3 hours searching for a ghost. Finally, the lead inspector, a man with a sour face named Mr. Jacobs, emerged from the dry storage. He was holding a single, small, dark pellet in a plastic bag. "And what?" he said triumphantly. "Do you call this?" Elena and Maria looked at it. It was a mouse dropping. "That's impossible," Maria whispered. That wasn't there this morning." "That's what they all say," Jacobs said, writing furiously on his clipboard. "This is a serious violation. You're a grade C, effective immediately. We're shutting you down for 48 hours for mandatory pest control and deep cleaning." A C grade was a death sentence. It would be plastered on the front door for all the world to see. Elena looked at the inspector. She looked at the tiny, perfect dropping. It was a plant. This whole thing was a plant. The anonymous tip, the discovery. It was all Thorn. "You can't do this!" Maria yelled, as Jacob slapped the bright, shameful C sticker on the front window. "It's done," he said. "Appeal it if you want. See you in court. In 6 months." The inspectors left. The staff stood in the empty, silent dining room, staring at the bright orange letter that had just sealed their fate. The restaurant was closed. The reservations were gone. The review was scathing. Thorn hadn't just made an offer. He was executing a siege. He was starving them out. Leo slumped onto a bar stool, his head in his hands. "It's over." Elena stood by the window, staring at the C grade. The humiliation from that first night was nothing compared to this. He had attacked her business, her legacy, and her people. He thought she was a tech girl playing restaurant. He thought she was in over her head. She turned from the window, her eyes cold as ice. "No," she said, her voice quiet, but vibrating with absolute resolve. "It's not over." She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Not her lawyer. Not David. "Hi, Robert," she said. "It's Elena Vance. Yes, from Athena. I need a favor. I need the best digital forensics team you know, and I need them. Right now." Marcus Thorn had declared war using whispers and regulations. Elena Vance was about to fight back with data, and data she knew was a weapon that never, ever missed. For the next 48 hours, the Gilded Spoon was closed to the public, but it was far from empty. Elena had turned her upstairs office into a war room. The team she'd called in wasn't a PR firm. It was a 3-person crew of white hat hackers she'd known since her early coding days. "So the goal," Elena said, pacing in front of a whiteboard, "is to prove direct collusion. Marcus Thorn, Genevieve Harding at the Chronicle, and the Department of Health Inspector, Jacobs. Harding is easy," said Socket, a young man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He clicked a few keys. Her son, William Harding. His startup, Future Foods, was tanking. 3 weeks ago, it received a $1.2 million seed investment from a blind VC called Dynamic Futures LLC. I traced the LLC's registration. It's a shell company, and the address, it's the same as the Thorn Dynamics headquarters. "So it was a bribe," Elena said, her jaw tightening. "He paid for the review." "He didn't just pay for it," Socket said, pulling up another file. "The Chronicle uses a cloud-based server for its drafts. Harding's first draft of the review was almost positive. She called the duck classic, and the service attentive. Then, A new draft was uploaded at 2:17 a.m. from an IP address registered to Marcus Thorne's penthouse. He didn't just feed her the lines, Elena breathed. He wrote it himself. Okay, Elena said. That's Exhibit A. What about the health department? That's harder, said the second operator. Wraith. The anonymous tip was called in from a burner phone. No trace. Forget the tip, Elena said, her mind working. Look at the inspector. Jacobs, where does he put his money? This took longer. They worked through the night. Elena, still in her waitress uniform, she'd been too busy to change, downed cups of coffee, her eyes glued to the data streams. Downstairs, she could hear Leo, Maria, and David, who had volunteered to scrub the kitchen from top to bottom, proving their loyalty. The sound of their work fueled her fury. At 4:30 a.m., Wraith let out a low whistle. Got him. She pulled up a series of bank transfers. Mr. Jacobs has a gambling problem. Lots of debt to an online bookie based in Antigua. For the last 6 months, he's been making regular, small payments. But 3 days ago, right after Thorne visited the restaurant, Jacobs's debt, all $85,000 of it, was paid off in full. By who? Elena asked. By Wells Consulting, Wraith said. And Wells Consulting gets 90% of its funding from Cynthia Wells, chief legal counsel at Thorne Dynamics. Elena leaned back. They had him. They had him cold. Bribery of a public official, blackmail of a journalist. And the mouse-dropping? Elena asked. This is the fun part, Socket said, grinning. He pulled up the security footage from the alley behind the restaurant. A camera Elena had installed herself, one that fed directly to her private server. Watch the delivery entrance, he said. The footage showed the 6 a.m. produce delivery. Then, at 6:15 a.m., nothing. At 6:17 a.m., a flicker. A man in a city maintenance uniform walked by. Accidentally, dropped his toolbox, and bent down near the door's threshold. When he stood up, he kicked something small and dark under the door into the kitchen. He didn't plant it in the dry storage, Elena realized. He planted it just inside the kitchen. He knew the inspectors were coming and where they'd find it. And the man in the maintenance uniform? Socket asked, running facial recognition. Meet Paul Romer. He's not a city employee. He's on the payroll of Thorne Dynamics, Security Division. Elena stood up. She had a file that could not only clear her restaurant's name, but could potentially send Marcus Thorne to prison. She could go to the press. She could go to the district attorney. A wave of vindication washed over her. But then she stopped. If she went to the Wall Street Journal, it would be a huge story. Thorne would be ruined, eventually. But he would drag her into a legal war that would last years. He would countersue. He would bleed her dry with motions and appeals. The scandal would still be attached to the gilded spoon. The C-grade would stick in people's minds. The mud would never fully wash off. She didn't want a long, public war. She wanted a quick, silent execution. She looked at her team. Wipe the servers. Leave no trace you were ever here. Send the complete file, encrypted, to my personal device. What are you going to do? Socket asked. Elena walked to the window, looking down at the street as the sun began to rise, glinting off the sea on her door. Mr. Thorne thought he could force me to sell for $32 million, she said. He's about to find out the real price of this building. She picked up her phone and dialed David. David, she said, her voice sharp. Call Thorne Dynamics. Tell them, the representative of AV Holdings is ready to discuss a new offer. You're going to negotiate with him? David asked, incredulous. Oh, yes, Elena said, a predatory chill in her voice. I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. Marcus Thorne strode into the Gilded Spoon at 2 p.m., the time Elena had specified. The restaurant was empty, silent, and dark, save for a single light over the window booth where he'd sat before. The C-grade was still on the door, a badge of his victory. He was smirking. The waitress-turned-mogul had caved. The bad press, the health code violation. He knew it wouldn't take long. She was a tech girl, after all. She didn't have the stomach for a real street fight. He saw her sitting in the booth, not in the power suit, he noted with satisfaction. She was back in the simple waitress uniform, her hair in that severe bun. She looked defeated. "Miss Vance," he said, sliding into the booth. His lawyers, Harrison and Wells, stood behind him. "Back in uniform. I see you've accepted your station. I'm glad you've come to your senses. Are you ready to accept my original, generous offer?" Elena didn't look up. She was polishing a wine glass with a cloth, the same thing she'd been doing when he first walked in. "Hello, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice quiet. "Thank you for coming. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." "Oh? My offer is $32 million. It's not complicated. Take it, or this place becomes a parking lot." "The misunderstanding," Elena said, finally looking up, "is that you think you're here to negotiate a purchase. You're not. You're here to negotiate your surrender." Thorne's smirk faltered. "What did you say?" "David," Elena said. David Chen, who had been standing in the shadows, stepped forward and placed a slim, black folder on the table. He did not hand it to Thorne. He handed it to his lawyer, Cynthia Wells. "What is this?" Thorne snapped. "Open it, Miss Wells," Elena suggested. "You'll want to see this. It concerns Wells Consulting." Cynthia Wells's professional poise evaporated. Her face went ashen as she opened the folder. Inside was a single printed sheet, the bank transfer record showing her consulting firm paying off the $85,000 gambling debt of Health Inspector Jacobs. This is proprietary. This is," she stammered. "Illegally obtained?" Elena offered. "Let's not talk about what's legal, Cynthia. Let's talk about what's provable. Mr. Harrison," she said, turning to the other lawyer, "you're next." David placed a second folder in front of him. Harrison opened it. It was a high-resolution still from the security footage, showing Paul Romer from Thorne's security team planting the droppings. It was time-stamped. "That proves nothing," Harrison blustered. "It's a man in an alley." "Is it?" Elena said. "Because the next page is Mr. Romer's employment contract with Thorne Dynamics, which you signed off on. And the next page is his expense report for one maintenance uniform and one box of rodent pest control, which he filed the day before the anonymous tip." Harrison was silent. "And finally, Mr. Thorne," Elena said, "this one is for you." David placed the last folder in front of him. Thorne ripped it open. It contained 2 documents. The first was Genevieve Harding's original, positive review of the Gilded Spoon. The second was the server log, showing the final, negative draft being uploaded from an IP address, his IP address. Marcus Thorne stared at the evidence. This wasn't just a lawsuit, this was criminal. Bribery, conspiracy, wire fraud. She had him. "You," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You, waitress." "I believe the term you used was sweetheart," Elena corrected him. "What do you want?" he snarled, the trapped animal lashing out. "Money? A bigger offer? Name your price. 50 million? "I already have money, Mr. Thorne. I earn money. You just take it." "No, I don't want your money." "Then what?" he yelled, slamming his fist on the table. Elena leaned forward, her eyes, no longer calm, blazing with a cold fire. "Here is my offer," she said. "It's non-negotiable. First you will call your friend, Inspector Jacobs, and you will inform him that he is going to re-inspect this restaurant today. He is going to find it in perfect condition, and he is going to remove that sign from my door and publicly apologize for the clerical error." She pointed to Harrison. "Second, you will have Mr. Romer and his supervisor fired by the end of the day. Their severance will be generous, and it will come with an ironclad NDA, paid for by you. She pointed to Wells. Third, you will have Genevieve Harding issue a full, public retraction in tomorrow's Chronicle. She will state that she dined again anonymously and found the restaurant to be a 5-star experience. She will call her original review a terrible error in judgment. Thorne was breathing hard, his face purple. This is extortion. This is leverage, Elena shot back. You taught me that, Marcus. And fourth, you will take your $32 million dollar offer, and your lawyers, and your entire redevelopment plan, and you will get off my block. You will never again contact AV Holdings. You will never again set foot in my restaurant, and you will never, ever speak to me or my staff again. And if I don't, he seethed, if I tell you to go to hell? If you tell me to go to hell, Elena said, smiling, then this entire file gets sent to the Wall Street Journal and the SEC. I've been reading about that Brazil project of yours, Marcus. Shaky financing. Investors are already nervous. A massive scandal involving bribery, blackmail, and fraud. Why, I think that would be enough to shatter investor confidence completely. Your house of cards would be in default by Monday. She had him. Checkmate. He knew it. His lawyers knew it. You bitch, he breathed. I'm the person who says no, Mr. Thorne, Elena said. Remember? She stood up and brushed off her apron. You have 1 hour to make the calls. Use your cell phone. I'll be in the kitchen, preparing for our reopening. Marcus Thorne sat in the booth, defeated. The rage had drained away, leaving a hollow, grey humiliation. He'd been beaten, outthought, outmaneuvered, and utterly destroyed by a woman he'd dismissed as part of the furniture. His lawyers were already on their phones, their voices low and frantic. Cynthia, just do it, he snapped. Call Harding. Tell her to write the damned retraction, or I'll ruin her, too. He watched Elena Vance walk away. She wasn't striding in victory. She was just going back to work, polishing glasses, checking inventory lists with Chef Maria. She was a waitress. He couldn't reconcile the two images, the tech titan who had just dismantled his life, and the woman in the simple black apron. His ego, battered and bruised, had one last question. He had to know. He stood up, his legs unsteady. Vance! He called out. Elena paused, a stack of clean napkins in her hand. She turned, her face impassive. Why? He asked, his voice cracking. Why go through all this? The uniform, the serving. You're one of the richest women in the world. Why? Eleanor walked slowly back toward him. She stopped just a few feet away. You asked me that first night who I was to the owner. You asked if I was his daughter. I am. My father, Arthur Vance, built this place. He loved it, but he was a terrible businessman. He ran it into the ground, just like you said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the empty room. When he died, he left me nothing but debt and this building. I could have sold it. I could have let you have it. But the staff, Leo, Maria, Peter, they were his family when he pushed me away. They stayed, even when he couldn't pay them. They loved this place when he only knew how to use it. She looked around the dining room, a flicker of genuine warmth in her eyes. So I paid off the debts, but I didn't know how to run a restaurant. I only knew data. I didn't know people. I didn't know how to lead them. You can't learn that from a spreadsheet, Mr. Thorne. You can't learn it from a boardroom. She adjusted her apron. So I came to work. I learned how to bus tables. I learned how to polish silver. I learned how to take an order, how to handle a complaint, and how to earn the respect of my team, not just buy it. Marcus was staring at her, the final, terrible realization dawning. He had thought AV Holdings was her father's. He had thought she was just the representative, the tech girl brought in to manage the asset. You said you represent the owner, he whispered. I do. I represent their interests, Elena said. But who is the owner? He demanded. Who did all this? Who are you? Elena looked him dead in the eye. The calm, professional mask was back, but her eyes were triumphant. She held up her polishing cloth. The first night you were here, you told me to just leave. You told me I was in over my head. You demanded to see the owner. She put the cloth down and placed her hands on her hips, the timeless pose of a worker who is tired, but proud. You've been speaking to her all along. His face, if possible, turned even whiter. The waitress, the representative, the tech mogul, the owner. They were all the same person. He hadn't just been out-negotiated by a competitor. He had been humiliated by the help. You. He had no words. There was nothing left to say. His entire empire had been checkmated by a waitress in an apron. Without another word, Marcus Thorne turned. He shoved past his silent lawyers and stumbled out the front door of the Gilded Spoon, a broken man. Elena watched him go. Then she turned to Leo, who had been watching the entire exchange, his mouth wide open. Leo, she said, her voice bright and warm. All business. Let's get that C grade off the window. We have a dinner service to prep for. The next 24 hours were a blur. At 4:05 p.m., a sweating, pale Inspector Jacobs arrived. He mumbled an apology about a database error and a rookie mistake, ripped the C grade from the window, and replaced it with a gleaming A. At 6:00 p.m., the online edition of the Chronicle posted Genevieve Harding's new review, titled, "A Second Look, The Gilded Spoon is a 5-star revelation." It was a glowing, fawning piece of prose, praising the duck as a masterpiece of French technique, and the service, led by the brilliantly intuitive floor manager, Elena, as the new standard for hospitality in New York. By 7 p.m., the phone was ringing. It was not cancellations. It was bookings. The entire weekend was sold out in an hour. Before the first seating, Elena gathered the entire staff in the dining room. They were buzzing, confused but exhilarated. "I owe you all an explanation," Elena said, standing in the center of the room. She was still in her uniform. "That man, Marcus Thorne, tried to destroy this restaurant. He wanted to buy the building and tear it down. I stopped him." "But how?" Peter, the host, asked. Who are you?" He called you Vance. "Like Athena AI." "Vance?" Elena took a deep breath. "My full name is Elena Vance. My father was Arthur Vance. 6 months ago, I used my company, AV Holdings, to buy this restaurant and save it from bankruptcy." The staff stared. "I've been working with you, not to spy, but to learn, to earn my place here. I couldn't save my father, but I knew, with your help, I could save his legacy. I am not just your manager." She untied her apron, but this time she just held it. "My name is Elena Vance, and I am the owner of the Gilded Spoon." For a second there was silence. Then Chef Maria started to laugh. It turned into a cheer. Leo started clapping, and soon the entire room erupted in applause and shouts. They weren't shocked. They were relieved. It all made sense. The quiet authority, the owner who was always aware, the fierceness with which she defended their jobs. "So the new owner isn't some faceless corporation?" Leo said, beaming. "No," Elena said, smiling. "It's just me. And as my first official act as the owner, you're all getting a 20% raise, effective immediately. And Leo, Sarah's medical bills are covered. All of them. Consider it a bonus from the ownership." Leo's eyes filled with tears as the staff cheered even louder. The restaurant opened an hour later, and it was the best service they had ever run. There was a new energy, a new pride. They weren't just staff, they were a family, and they had just won a war. 6 months later, Elena Vance sat in her upstairs office, which was now her permanent base of operations. The Gilded Spoon was the hardest reservation to get in New York, famed not just for its food, but for its unshakable integrity. She'd expanded, buying the bakery next door and making it the restaurant's official patisserie. She was sipping coffee and reading the morning's Wall Street Journal. A small article on page C12 caught her eye. Thorne Dynamics enters bankruptcy protection. She read the short article. After a series of high-profile scandals, including the collapse of the Brazil project and rumors of widespread bribery and corruption, investor confidence had evaporated. Marcus Thorne had been forced out by his board, and the company was being sold for parts. She smiled, a small, satisfied smile. She had never leaked the file. She hadn't needed to. She'd simply exposed him to his own people, and his own rotten foundation had done the rest. Leo knocked on the open door, bringing her a fresh cup. He wasn't just a bartender anymore. He was the new general manager. "See the news, boss?" he asked, nodding at the paper. "I did," Elena said, folding the paper. "A shame," Leo said, with a grin that said it was anything but. "A consequence," Elena corrected him, looking out the window at the bustling street below. "Maria needs a new sous chef, and the bakery needs a manager. Let's get to work." "Right away, boss," Leo said. Elena looked down at the full reservation book. The Gilded Spoon was safe, her family was safe, and the waitress was finally, truly, in charge. And so, the story of Elena Vance and Marcus Thorne comes to an end. It's a story that proves that real power isn't about the money you have or the buildings you can tear down. Real power lies in integrity, in quiet competence, and in the courage to protect the people who depend on you. Marcus Thorne saw a waitress. He saw someone in over her head. What he failed to see was the owner, the strategist, and the protector standing right in front of him. He learned, too late, that you should never, ever underestimate the person pouring your coffee. What did you think of Elena's ultimate revenge? Was it better than just taking his money? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of justice and hidden power, please like this video and share it with someone who needs a good story today. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. We have new stories coming every week. Thanks for listening.